All right. So another fun tip of the night is with lemons and limes. You know how sometimes it's like they just dry out is really what happens when they go old, right? So a way to avoid that, sorry about the label that's on here, but this is just limes and water. So you just I like to put it in a glass jar. You can put it in a plastic Tupperware, whatever, but you just cover the limes with water and then you keep them like that in your fridge and it keeps them so fresh.
Oh.
Yeah, because even here, like my limes were going dry within a week or two, and then I found out that trick. So now I want to share it with the world.
Amazing. Yeah. No, they do go bad
They really do.
a lot quicker if we don't use them.
So what's on the menu tonight is our turmeric rice. And then we have green protein soup, which is really delicious and easy to make. So it's a great one. And then and what I love about it is it's super versatile. So you should have parsley always as kind of like, it really adds to the flavor and it kind of cuts the bitterness while at the same time bringing out the bitterness, and adds a lot of nutrients and all that stuff too. But other than that, you can basically put whatever greens you have in your fridge, like if you've got, like the other day I had some bok choy. This is the end of my bok choy. So I actually just chopped off all the top of the greens that were starting to wilt. And then I'm just going to use this for some other dish. I had some fennel in my fridge, so I use that. I love using Swiss chard, or how do you say it in Swiss chard, or rainbow chard, right? Or kale you could use. You could use broccoli, you could use asparagus, really any green you can think of, you can put into this soup. Obviously the texture will change if it's more like broccoli versus just leafy greens, right? It'll be maybe a little tiny bit more chunky, but if you've got a good blender, then most of them are just going to turn out the same delicious green. And then you can switch up the nutrient profile, right? Because one of the most important things in our diet is having diversity of color. We want to have something that's a little more orange, green, red, yellow, all of the colors, even tans and beiges, which is, things like our lentils and ginger and stuff like that. All right, so that's our green protein soup. And then we have I'm throwing in an added bonus sauce tonight. So we're doing cilantro chutney and date chutney. And then our veggie dish, this is another one that's super versatile, which is great. So today we're gonna do sweet potato, and I was planning on cauliflower, but I could only find broccoli, so I'm gonna do broccoli. But if you guys have cauliflower, it's the same. And you can literally use any vegetables. I usually say up to 3. So you could do like carrots, sweet potato, broccoli, or whatever you've got in your fridge. This works really well. Okay, so first thing you want to get started is to boil your mung beans. So I've had my mung beans soaking all afternoon. If you don't soak your mung beans or your lentils, it's not the end of the world. It's like fine. There's actually different controversial information out there. Like some people say it really helps to, remove things from the lentils. Other people say it really doesn't make that much of a difference. So who knows, but I do find it makes it a bit more digestible. And if anything, it definitely makes it faster to cook. So those are my soaked full green mung beans. You could also use split mung beans. You could use cashews. You could use paneer cheese as well. So the protein is also really versatile, not just the greens. So now I'm just going to rinse them a little. And more or less for the half cup of mung beans, you want to put about 6 cups of water. And then when you put the greens in, you may want to add a little bit more water. You can really change it up depending on whatever texture you like with the soup. So we're just gonna bring it up to a boil and then continue cooking on a low flame. Most things we wanna try and cook with a low flame in Ayurveda. And if you do have the luxury of having a gas stove, that's awesome. It is preferred over the electric stove, ideally. Then you can also do fun things like char your roast, roast your red peppers and that kind of stuff on the open fire. Okay, so now that that's cooking, I don't have a lid for that pot. So jungle improvisation is use a plate. I would say probably like one of the most important tools of my kitchen is this strainer. So we're gonna take the rice now. I always start with the things that take longer to cook, right? Because cooking is all about timing as well, which takes a while to get it. But so the rice, this is a nice brown basmati rice, which is actually a quick cook 20-minute one. So you also always want to rinse your rice in cold water. Ideally rinse it until the water runs clear. So one of the things I find when cooking rice is I like to put just a little bit of, I usually use ghee, or if you use, coconut oil or whatever healthy fat that you choose to use. I usually just put a tiny bit, like about half a teaspoon in while it's cooking. And then when it's finished cooking, then I take, the next 2 tablespoons that I would usually put in or so for like, the cup of rice, tablespoon or 2, and put it in after. And then that make it, really ensures that the rice isn't going to be sticky. Okay, so for our turmeric rice, it's super simple. I've got about a cup of rice. This rice is más o menos 2 to 1. I think it's like 1 3/4. So just follow the instructions of whatever rice you choose. In Ayurveda, they say that basmati rice is one of the more superior strains. I don't know if they call it strains of rice or variations of rice. It's really easy to digest. And, when it comes to white rice, it actually is quite full of nutrients compared to others. So now we're going to put a bit of salt and about a half a teaspoon of turmeric. So with turmeric, you don't really have to go overboard. Usually you want to use somewhere between a half and 1 teaspoon. So, we could use 3/4 today just to be in the middle way, but oftentimes people use a little bit too much turmeric when they're first starting out, getting really excited about it, but it's not necessary. And anytime you have turmeric, it is ideal to have it with a healthy fat. The healthy fat will, turmeric is very heating. So I have here quite a bunch of this beautiful organic turmeric root, but I don't often use it because it's super, super heating. So especially here in the hot season, you don't want to go overboard. Once it's turned into the powder form, it's not as heating, and you get more of the curcumin this way as well. And it's just, safer for everyone to have, because turmeric is really detoxifying for the liver. So if we have too much of it too quick, you can have like a bad cleansing reaction, which could be, breakout of a rash or eczema, aggravation and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and put about 3/4 of a teaspoon. I'm going to put about a half a teaspoon of rice, or sorry, salt in the rice. And I'm going to put a half a teaspoon of ghee as well. So that's about that. You know, there's another variation of turmeric rice that I love that you would at this point add, I believe it's 2 cloves to this amount. So you'd add 2 cloves at this point, let it cook. And then in Edmonton, especially, and you know, most parts of the world that have international shopping, grocery shopping, you can find curry leaves. So then you would heat up your couple tablespoons of ghee, put the curry leaves in, and then pour that on top of the rice. Oh, mwah, it is so delicious. And that's a really good one, especially for this time of the year. And, you know, kapha time as we're getting into the spring. Curry leaves are just really good, full of iron, full of nutrients, and they are gentle laxative. And the cloves are nice and heating. So that's a really yummy variation as well. And okay, so I know the recipe I sent you guys of the cilantro chutney was quite elaborate. What we're gonna make tonight is just kind of a simple version of that. And then you can have that on your recipe list for when you want to, you know, go a little all out, which basically the difference is in the one that I sent you is you heat a bit of coconut oil, put the spices in that oil, let them pop and come to life, and then pour it on top of your already made cilantro chutney and stir it in. So it just adds more flavor and spice and, you know, makes it a little different. So this is an awesome tool that I recommend everyone have in their kitchen. I don't want to tip it too much, but it's this beautiful, maybe I'll tip the camera a little. So it's this beautiful spice tin. In a traditional Indian kitchen, you would have one that's sweet spices. So like your cardamom, ginger, cloves and vanilla and that kind of thing. And then you would have your one with turmeric, mustard seeds, cumin, and all of that. So yeah, I love this thing. It's not super, super practical for travel because, you know, it will get mixed up and spill over, but it's beautiful just to have in your pantry. Okay.
Sorry, Jess, for the rice,
Okay.
how much water did you put in?
I put 2 cups of water for 1 cup of rice.
So
Yeah.
it's like the same as other rice? Okay.
Pretty much, yeah. This one, it does say 1 3/4, but I find it just is better with 2. So once the mung beans have come to a boil, you turn down the heat and just let it simmer. Same with the rice. So the rice is almost at a boil. At this point, you would maybe want to make some digestive tea to let it steep for you and your family or your guests. So this is cumin, coriander, and fennel seed tea. Super classic, easy to make. I just like to have a jar in my house at all times. I usually put about, it's traditionally about a third. So a third of coriander, a third of cumin, a third of fennel, but I generally put a tad bit less of cumin because, you know, fennel's a little sweeter, coriander is a bit more astringent, where cumin can be, you know, a little bit more pungent and intense. All you do is take about a teaspoon per cup. So if you're going to make 4 servings, put 4 cups in your kettle or in the pot. You know, it's super easy just to boil it. I find you also get a little bit more out of the seeds if you boil it. So let's say you could use like 2 teaspoons for 4 cups rather than if you're steeping it, right? Because if you boil it for 5 minutes, you really get out all the stuff out of the seeds and then strain it. Or you can put it in a fancy teapot, let it steep for 10 minutes. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is prep our veg for our veggie dish. Okay, so the rice is officially boiling, just turned it down to simmer. Okay, so a couple tricks. We're gonna peel our ginger and then grate the ginger. Okay, so I'm going to use ginger for the sabji dish, the veggie dish. So grating it up, or sorry, before I grate it up, I peel it. So this is the trick. Instead of using a paring knife or whatever, just use a spoon and that'll take off just the skin. It's less dangerous and much more effective because when you use a knife, you wind up taking off way too much of the skin and getting right into the ginger root itself. No need to waste. So really, ginger can be to taste, anywhere from a teaspoon to a tablespoon or so. Remember that if there is really high pitta, then ginger is heating after all. But it's one of the more balancing, pungent spices out there. So then you just take your couple inches of ginger. Ideally, you would do it on a really small setting, but the small settings I've discovered on this aren't the best. So I'm just doing it on this kind of medium one. And you just grate it up. And that's all. So the spices for our sabji can also, vary depending on the season. You could put a little bit more, for example, coriander powder in the summer months. Right now in the spring, in the northern countries, you would maybe put a little bit more ginger, a little bit more pepper, a little bit more garlic. So garlic is heating as well. Speaking of garlic, we're gonna put a couple cloves of garlic, just because I really love the taste of sweet potato and garlic together. So yummy. And it makes this dish a little bit more yummy for the family as well. If we were making it totally sattvic, then we would omit the garlic and onion. When I first started cooking Ayurvedically, all those years ago for my family, they would say, oh yeah, okay, but can you make it tastier? So this is like a nice, because also onion and garlic have awesome healing properties. It's just, they are stimulating. And, as we would look at it as rajasic to the mind. And so, but, we're not monks and nuns, we're householders. And so we need a little stimulation and a little flavor in our lives with all this stress we go through and, So a good trick about garlic is the healing properties are really activated once it's crushed and cut. So the longer, and then it also likes to aerate and, have contact with the oxygen of the atmosphere. And when that happens, it just enhances the healing properties. So you want to chop your garlic kind of early on in your cooking prep. It doesn't have to be like an hour before or anything, but just ideally letting it sit open for 5 to 10 minutes will really activate it. Dice it up really nice and small as well. That also just activates it. So I've got my ginger and garlic in a pile now, and then I'm just going to chop up my onion. So I'm just going to use red onion because that's what I had, but you could really use, white onion as well. It doesn't matter. Technically, white onion is a bit more appropriate for cooking.
How long do you simmer the mung beans?
Yeah, good question. So about 20, I would say about for 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. If they're soaked, it might be more like 15, but if not soaked, 20, even 25 possibly. Because basically what we want is and if it was the cheese or the cashews, it would for sure be done enough in 15.
Okay. And for yellow dal, these guys, that would be.
Yeah, I would say that would be 15, 20 for sure. Okay. Yeah.
Because I always find I overcook them. Right.
Better to overcook the legumes than undercook them at least, though, for sure.
That's true.
So yeah, usually at the about like 10-minute mark of the mung beans, I'll give them a little look. And that's when I'll add in the bay leaf. So this recipe is pretty simple on the spices. We put in a big bay leaf or 2 small ones. So I've got those here. I'm gonna pop those in now. And then this, we also put half a teaspoon of turmeric powder. And if you guys have coriander powder, you can use that more, like kind of more preferably. You can also use coriander seeds like I have here. I don't have a grinder right now, so I'm just using the full seeds, and they'll blend up good enough in the blender. And I don't mind having like a little piece of coriander seed here and there, but especially if you have a Vitamix, they'll blend right up. But technically you'd want coriander powder, about, can't remember off the top of my head, I think it's 2 tablespoons, 1 or 2 tablespoons. You put a little extra, it's okay. And then about a teaspoon of cumin seeds. Okay, and this is hing vistak, which is also a special spice. So this is a spice mix, the hing vistak. This is from Banyan Botanicals, but you can also look for just hing, H-I-N-G, or asafoetida. And all we need is like a pinch of the asafoetida. Because this is a blend, I can put a couple of shakes because it also has cumin, ginger. Yes, this is the pure hing. Well, it's usually always mixed with fenugreek. So just a dash of that in your lentils, as well in the cauliflower and potato dish, you can put a dash of that because, you know, cauliflower and sweet potatoes especially can be like a bit gas producing for some people. So that'll eliminate that issue. Okay. Very good. So I'm just about done chopping my onion. And a trick about chopping onions is you want to really make sure that your knife is as sharp as possible. The sharper the knife, the less tears you will cry. Yeah, there's just something about the way when the onion is cut with a sharp knife, it just doesn't release as much of that chemical reaction that makes us cry. Okay, so now we're going to caramelize the spices for our sabji. So for the sabji, you can use, again, whichever healthy fat you prefer. I've got my coconut oil here. Put a little bit of ghee as well, just because I like to mix them up a little. By the way, Chella's in the background, just like having a fit that she's not the center of attention. She's officially got up on the couch. She's like, ah, ah.
How is she doing?
So this is an important part. So now that the sabji's in, so you can get creative with your spices, like I said. So since it's spring for most of you guys, we're going to use some mustard seeds. So ideally you find the brown mustard seeds. And then we are gonna put them in first into the hot oil. So about a half a teaspoon or so. And what we want to do is just wait patiently, but prepared for them to start popping. And once they start popping, then we're going to put a half a teaspoon, anywhere from half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon of cumin seeds to your taste. A little bit of turmeric, about a half a teaspoon of turmeric. And then we're going to put in our garlic, ginger, and onion and let that caramelize while we chop up our potato and our broccoli. And then we're almost done. Can you believe it? Then we just got to whip up our salsas. We're going to use the blender a couple of times. You know, I feel like if you don't clean your blender at least once a day, are you really living?
Exactly.
Okay, so you might have heard them start popping. And they'll actually start jumping. So now I'm going to put in my cumin seeds, turmeric, and also a dash of the hing. And then for, 20 seconds or so, we just let that come alive. We'll start, really smelling the aroma of the spices. And now we're going to pop in our onion, garlic, and ginger. Want to pop a lid on that. So I've got 2 different kinds of sweet potatoes. So there's always a bit of like a discussion about, what is the other one in English? There's sweet potato. Yeah, exactly. I remember when I worked at Planet Organic as one of my first jobs in the kitchen, I started out as the dish pig, as they call them, and dish Miss Piggy. And I asked the guys in produce, like, what is the difference between yam and sweet potato? Like, sometimes you see the yellow ones marked, sometimes you see and they basically said, like, oh, well, whatever comes in as from the States, like, that's what we mark it as. Sometimes the orange ones come as yam, sometimes they come as named sweet potato. I was like, oh, really? So.
Yeah, I was always confused about the difference.
Yeah, it just kind of depends, really, I guess, on who you ask, but
I think yam may be slightly sweeter.
Yeah, like more the orange one, I think.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
But then there's just also so many different varieties of potatoes and even sweet potatoes. Like down here, I've seen purple sweet potatoes. And it's really not common here in Costa Rica to see these orange ones. So I'm always super excited about the orange ones. This is an organic one as well. I know it's not always easy to buy all of our food organic, but if you're going to buy, things organic, check out the Dirty Dozen list, and that'll show you which things you really want. So potatoes is on there. Potatoes and greens, really.
I think berries.
And berries, yes, exactly. Okay, I'm gonna stir this. Okay, so the sweet potato takes a little bit longer to cook than the broccoli, so we're gonna chop it first and get it going. So you would put your veggies in order of, density basically onto how quickly they'll cook. Carrots, I find, take the longest, more than potatoes, and sweet potatoes take even less than regular potatoes, I find. So for the green protein soup, if you were to use the cheese or the cashews, you would definitely only have to boil them for about 15 minutes or so. And you can put the spices in right away as well. I just like to bring everything up, especially with the lentils. These ones I don't find foam very much, but sometimes the lentils will foam. So you can bring just the lentils up to a boil, remove the foam, and then add your spices so that you're not wasting any of your spices. I'll show you guys my chopping. It's basically just go with what feels good, but you know, there's generally easier ways to kind of chop things. You kind of want to try and find like the way of the vegetable. Like with onions, for example, you would want to chop it along those lines. Just goes easier. Sharp knife really means everything. I had a friend once say she would marry the man that could sharpen her knives. I'm like, is it really that hard to sharpen knives? Okay, there we've got our diced potatoes. So you really want to just coat the vegetables with the spices. We can also add a bit of salt and pepper. So salt and pepper really to taste, but anywhere around like a half a teaspoon or so. Okay, good. And now I'm going to get a bit of water in a glass. And we'll just add it little by little to the sabji, and it like kind of steams it, you know? The pan's nice and hot. I just usually put about a splash in at a time because you don't want it to turn out soupy. Or maybe you do, and you can do that too, make it a little soupier. So then we're going to chop the broccoli to have it ready for our sabji. And with the greens, so whatever greens you have, remember it's going to be blended up. So it doesn't have to be chopped perfectly. You know, if you've got asparagus to go in or broccoli or whatever. For your sabji, you might want to chop it like a little more nice. I usually just start with chopping the base of the broccoli. And then once I get up to the head, I kind of try to let the pieces come, you know, chop them in the way that they would, so you don't lose all the little pieces everywhere. So my mung beans are done. I just turned them off. Because once we put the greens into the green protein soup, it's really like it's done in a couple of minutes because we just want the greens to basically wilt and cook a little, but not overcook. We should still have them looking nice and vibrant and green. Okay, so for the green protein soup, you use about 1/2 cup of parsley. So same thing. If you have a not very great blender, you may want to chop it more finely, but really you could even just, pull off the head of the sprig and toss it in there because you're going to blend it in the blender after. So if you're using greens like collard greens or Swiss chard, then you would leave the middle and just take the leaves away. So once they're washed, you just go ahead and pull it nice and close to the spine, like so. And then you can use these for making veggie soup broth. There's also other cute recipes you can make with them, but that's usually what I do because I always think, oh, I'll make something else out of it and kind of just forget about them. And then, oh, I'll just make soup out of it after all. But you can just put in a nice Ziploc bag, all of these. And you know what? You can even put, especially if things are organic, you can put all your scraps in this bag. Onion scraps, like, the peel of the garlic, the peel of the ginger, and put it into that bag. And then at the end of the week, toss it all into a nice big soup pot with water. And, a really pro way to do it is to use cheesecloth. So you put all of these things into a cheesecloth and tie it up, toss that into the pot, and then you can just pull that right on out. Or you just, scoop it out little by little, but that's a real fast way to do it. And then you've got your broth. You can also add a fresh onion or, a little more spices in there. And then you put in whatever you want to make your soup out of.
So even if you had the kale, because you know how when you have just regular kale, they tell you not to use this part because it's too bitter.
Totally.
Would it still be okay for a broth? Probably.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
I find it is, especially if you, add some more a little bit of garlic and onion and to kind of cut the bitter.
Yeah, that would. Okay, cool.
Okay, so we're going to check on these sweet potatoes. So we basically want the sweet potatoes to be done before we put the broccoli in. So I'm just going to take my little spoon and press on. Oh yeah, they're nice and soft. Okay, so it's time for the broccoli to go in. Smells good in here, you guys. Okay, so once again, I'm going to put a couple splashes of water. Right away, put the lid on so it traps the steam in. So once you've got your greens ready, whatever greens you decide, you want to have somewhere around, I believe it's 4 cups, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even 8 cups. Nikita, you got the recipe close? It's 4 or 8 cups. It's a lot of greens.
I think it said 1 pound on the list.
Which I believe is 4 cups.
Yeah, or it might be a little bit more than that.
I think it's maybe even 8 cups.
I think you're right. I think it is 8.
Because usually I will fill the blender twice of things. I use this as my measuring cup. Another jungle trick. So yeah, it's a lot of greens. So you just put them all in there now, cook them for about 5 minutes or so with the protein. And then I generally will take the lid off and let it cool off for a little bit before I put it in the blender. Again, if you have an awesome blender, it doesn't really matter, but you just want to be conscious of turning it on and then opening up the lid a little bit to let out all the heat so it doesn't create a lot of pressure. All right, so I'm gonna check on the rice. One of the things that I like to do with the rice is kind of just tip it a little and see that, oh yes, it's done. So now remember, we only put a little bit of ghee in there. So I'm gonna put a couple more teaspoons, about a tablespoon and a half or so of ghee in the rice and fluff it up. Good, so then you just put the lid back on. And now we're going to make our cilantro chutney, which is a really nice, simple variation. Okay, so you can get fancy and pull off all of the individual leaves. And this is a really good one to get the kids involved in because it's safe and tedious, but you don't have to. That's just to make it really nice and smooth consistency. So I'm just gonna chop off the majority of the top, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll kind of like just shave the sides and get as much of the leaves off of the stem as I can. I don't mind it being a little bit chunky though either, so. And then same thing, I mean, look at here, the cilantro comes with the roots and everything, but this can go into your soup pile. So that goes in the blender, our cilantro. Then we need some fresh ginger as well. So I'm gonna peel this again. And if you have, especially in the spring season, now is the best time to enjoy a little bit of spicy food. So if you have a taste for spicy food, you can put in a green chili. I'm gonna admit it because it's really hot here right now and I'm all pitta. Not all pitta, but lots of it. Good. In goes the ginger. And if you put the chili, then you would, you know, for sure put honey. Because I'm not putting the chili, I don't need to put the honey. Just gonna check on our veggie dish. Okay, it's done. So heat's off on that. Now we need our lime for cilantro chutney. Here's another quick tip. If you don't have a juice thingy for your a squeezer for your lime, you can just use a fork and squeeze around the fork. And for my date chutney, I'm just gonna heat up a bit of water to put the dates in. Like I'm gonna put boiling water with the dates. You could also soak them, but since I didn't soak them, I'll just put them with the hot water to soften them up a little.
How long would you soak the dates for?
Really, even like half an hour is fine, yeah. And if they're the medjool dates, you may not have to soak them because they're so juicy and and delicious.
That's all I have.
Yeah, these ones are just some other kind of date that's pretty average. Oh yeah, those are the good ones.
Costco.
Yeah, exactly. You know, sometimes I'll bring one of those down to Costa Rica with me in my suitcase.
That's awesome.
Good, so I'm gonna put about a half a teaspoon of salt or so. That can also be to taste. And then we put some dried coconut, dried shredded coconut. So this can be, you know, the recipe calls for just a couple tablespoons. Sometimes I'll put like a quarter cup or half a cup because I like it kind of coconutty as well. So really as simple as that. If you're to put your chili and your honey in there, and then you just put a bit of water, just enough to blend it. Again, if you have a Vitamix, that's amazing because it will blend much easier. I'll mute you guys while I put the blender on. Okay, so now that it's blended up nicely, now I'm gonna turn the blender back on and just drizzle some olive oil in there while it's blending. So what that does is just help it with the texture a bit more. You want to do it a little taste test. You could also use coconut oil. So mine's a little bit waterier, more watery than I would love it to be, but over the next couple days, like once you put it in the fridge, it does lose some of the, it dries up a little. So using one of your reused jars, and there are ways to get off the labels, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. You know, it doesn't bother me that much. But if you're OCD and want to have beautiful jars, you can just, I think, use some baking soda. Okay. So you just want to have some sort of a sealed jar. And the cilantro chutney, you know, some people don't like cilantro, but this has been known to turn cilantro haters into cilantro lovers. And this can be like your ketchup, like you can really put it on anything. You know, if you're having like eggs and potatoes in the morning or with any kind of vegetable dish or rice, it just, you know, brings it to life. And cilantro is really good for detoxing heavy metals. And it's, you know, kind of where do we get enough cilantro in our diet to really do that? Cilantro chutney. And it's really cooling, unlike ketchup, which is heating. You know, it's still not ketchup. On another class, I'll teach you how to make an Ayurvedic ketchup, but.
Awesome.
Okay, so now I'm just gonna quickly rinse out the blender. If you guys have any questions, let me know. We're almost done.
How long is the chutney good for once you've made it in the
Yeah,
fridge?
good question. I would say like 4 to 7 days.
And you store it in the fridge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just make sure it's in a good sealed container and you should be good to go. Okay, so for our date chutney, this one's super simple. And like I said, if you have the medjool dates, like you just want to open them up, take out the pit. Use about a cup of dates, a tad bit of water, enough to blend. Let's save the rest of this over here because now I'm going to heat up a bit of ghee in this pan. The more you can reuse your hands in the kitchen, the better. This is what a chef needs a sous chef for and a dishwasher for.
Exactly.
Okay. And okay, pro tip about your ghee. So ghee does not have to be refrigerated. It's actually better to keep it on the counter, I would say. Because when you're taking it in and out of the fridge, then you can have condensation and maybe a drop of water will go in. You always want to use a clean spoon. So I wind up using 100 spoons every time I cook with ghee. So we're gonna put about a teaspoon in here. A large teaspoon, maybe even 2 teaspoons, that works. Okay, and now we're gonna put in, you would put in about a half a teaspoon of anise powder, but I've just got the full star anise here. So I'm gonna break it up a little and put it in. I've also made this recipe with fennel seeds when I don't have star anise. It turns out really nice also. And that's it, you guys. We're just gonna blend this up, and it takes a little bit more love to get it out of the blender, because it's a little more sticky. And once your green mung bean or your green protein soup has, cooled down a bit, you just pour it safely into your blender and blend it up. Whoops, boy, I tossed a little bit of hot ghee.
Oh no.
Oh no, Chelita, you can eat that, but not right now. So yeah, you just want to leave this for a minute or two so that the ghee really soaks up all of the star anise. So I might need to put a tad bit more water in here to make it blend well. I'm just using the same water that I soaked with. So this really truly turns into like a caramel kind of sauce. Some blenders you can undo from the bottom like this one, which can be nice for these kind of sauces. So if you're using the full anise, definitely blend it a little bit more. I'll probably blend it a bit more now that I have you guys off, when I have you off the camera, to not bore you with the blender. But yeah, you just blend it until it's like a caramel, put it into a sealed container. And the date chutney also can really be put on almost anything, like toast in the morning instead of jam. It just adds a really nice sweet component to your meal, which it is necessary for us to have our healthy sweet taste. Otherwise, we'll get cravings for artificial sugars and stuff like that. So when we have sweet potato and, even grains like rice and quinoa and wheat are all naturally sweet. So yeah, the date chutney, it's also really ojas building, really good for our immunity. So that's important in the springtime. And it's a delicious way to build your immunity, so yeah. Oh, Charlotte's looking up the ghee. She's like, it's cool enough.
You also had,
which is the best sous chef here.
Oh, so cute. You also had I don't know if I'm saying this right.
Oh, the fenugreek seeds.
Fenugreek seeds. When would I use those?
So those go in the green protein soup.
Okay.
So just along with like the rest of the spices, the bay leaf and stuff.
Yeah.
I can't find those here, so I don't use it. But that hing-the-stack mix I have has a little bit of the fenugreek too. And I think the hing you have has a little bit of fenugreek as well. But yeah, you would put it, fenugreek tastes really good with greens. It's one of those spices that enhances the greens.
How many, would you just do like half a teaspoon of the
Yeah,
seed?
about a half a teaspoon. Yeah. It's a strong spice like cumin kind of, so you don't want to go overboard, but it really like just enhances the flavor and cuts the bitterness as well.
Perfect.
Yay. Oh yes, and I think we might have forgot to put a little dash of salt in our date chutney too. You don't want to put a lot of salt, but just a little dash.
Okay.
Even the sweet stuff has to have a little dash of salt, really. I always find it so funny when people say that they don't eat salt. I'm like, do you eat out or eat anything from a package? Because you do eat salt. Even I eat salt. We all need a little bit of salt, and definitely have your, healthy salt, whether it's sea salt or Himalayan salt. But a little bit of iodized salt won't, be the end of the day either, here and there. So.
Perfect.
So do you guys have any last questions? Tonight's meal was really tridoshically balancing, which is what we want to try and do. Like, generally eat tridoshically balancing, especially if you're not familiar with your like individual constitution. But it's good to know your individual constitution and then make subtle changes. Like you know which chutney you want to use more of, and which vegetables are more suitable for you, and also eating seasonally. So when in doubt, just like go to your local farmers market or organic market and see what's in season. Get as much variety as possible, have fun, get all 6 tastes in your diet as much as possible. We've got the bitter and astringent from all of our greens, as well as the lentils. We've got the sweet from the date chutney. Also, the cilantro chutney has basically all 6 tastes in it, especially if you put some spice, then it's pungent as well. And a little bit of black pepper. If you don't do well with spice, a little bit of black pepper goes a long way, a little bit of ginger. And also, we can customize our meals for our individual constitution. So if you need any help with that, you can book a consultation with me. I also do more like private cooking classes where you would tell me your specific needs and wants and, flavor preferences and all that. And then I would help make a meal plan for you. And yeah, we'd go all over everything in much more detail and, into the science of the 6 taste theory and, the energetic effect of the foods, whether they're heating or cooling and all that stuff. So yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For the green soup. So once your like dal or mung beans are done,
Yes.
then you put in like your greens. How long should the greens be cooking, I guess, with the
right?
beans?
I would say about 5 minutes max. Like if you're just putting in like leafy greens, you can basically just toss them in and turn off the heat. Kale, you would maybe want to like let it cook for a minute or so. But yeah, if it's broccoli and asparagus and that kind of stuff, you'd have to let it maybe for like 5 minutes or so. And then also, I'll show you guys here. So I had actually made the green protein soup a couple days ago, and then today I was like, oh, I haven't finished that yet. I don't think I'm gonna make more. It'll just be like a real life cooking show where, ooh, voila, it's already done. Look at that.
That's awesome.
So yeah, just looks like that, más o menos. And then also very important, once it's in the bowl, you drizzle some olive oil. Ooh. A nice little drizzle of olive oil and a squeeze of lime. And that just really brings out all the flavors. And whenever we put a squeeze of lime on our greens, it helps make the iron more bioavailable. So a little bit of vitamin C brings out the iron.
Okay. And then do you just add like salt and pepper at all, or just salt to taste for the soup?
Yes, salt and pepper at the very end to taste. Yeah. I mean, definitely you'd want to put in about a half a teaspoon at least, and then go from there.
Cool.
Definitely got to put the salt in with the bitter greens to not too much, just otherwise it's like, ooh, Oh, so good, you guys. Well, thanks for coming and thanks for figuring out my special link there. So I'll
Yes, thank you so
everyone
much.
for recording.